Guys, welcome back to another video on F1 Hub, and in today's video we're going to review the 2024 Dutch Grand Prix. Yeah, the one Max Verstappen is going to win for the 1 billionth time. If you are new to this channel, remember to subscribe to keep up with weekly content on this channel, as I'll cover all of the Grand Prix, including the Italian Grand Prix next weekend. But before we get on to today's video, let's do the intro. Free practice started with the familiar sight of Sergio Perez going off the road. He wasn't the only one as the rain came down around Zandvoort. For the Dutch Grand Prix, Sergio Perez locked up at the first corner, but that would be a familiar sight for all of the other drivers. Pierre Gasly, who took a podium here last year, went off into the gravel too, on his first attempt around the tricky circuit. Many drivers struggled to get to grips with the circuit, but like I said before, he wasn't the only one. Also going off was Ferrari's Carlos Sainz. It was announced just before the summer break, well actually I would say after the summer break, is that Carlos Sainz was announced as a Williams driver for next year. Speaking of moving teams, Nico Hulkenberg's obviously moving to Kick Sauber, which is a brilliant achievement, but instead found something that wasn't quite so brilliant after going off into the gravel and hitting the wall, which he promptly did about 10 seconds later again, taking yet another trip into another gravel trap, this time approaching the final sector, and then did it again. So all these trips into the gravel for Nico Hulkenberg included another one going off at the first corner. Meanwhile, also in other news in FP1, Robert Schwartzman decided it was time to go into Kick Sauber and have that lovely experience of driving the world's worst Formula 1 car. So let's just move on then into FP1 conclusion ended with Max Verstappen going off the road as the session approached its end. His chief title rival Lando Norris, though, was right at the top of the timesheet, whilst Verstappen spun off Lando Norris with his brand new gyro cam, topped the session with a brilliant session for McLaren overall. They'd look to try and win another Grand Prix, but let's go to FP2. George Russell chased Lando Norris in FP1 and chased something else in FP2 called the gravel, going off at the same part. Nico Hulkenberg would later go off in FP3, but George Russell managed to keep it going and ended up going pretty good anyway. Once again, Mercedes looked strong. George Russell will top the session. Sergio Perez was off at the first corner for Red Bull again for the second time this weekend. Max Verstappen nearly suffered the same fate, but managed to stop out before he went off into the gravel, which is good news for the Dutchman, of course. I mean, as much as the supporters like to see Max Verstappen, they don't want to see him in the gravel, in the same way Nico Hulkenberg was in for the fourth time. Hulkenberg was off in the gravel again, which is just not great news. Surely he won't be able to finish in the points come the end of the weekend. Speaking of not being able to finish in the points at the end of the weekend, Carlos Sainz had an issue in free practice. That meant he had a gearbox issue, I think, and then was basically finished for the rest of the weekend, or at least for the end of free practice. Also finished for the end of the weekend was Logan Sargeant, as rumours continued to circulate on being replaced by Mick Schumacher, and here's why. Logan Sargeant was on fire this weekend, and none so more literally than actually hit the wall and going on fire. Speaking of hitting the wall, Nico Hulkenberg again hit the wall for the 1 billionth time this entire weekend. In fact, everyone was getting so fed up, even Kevin Magnussen decided to go off in sympathy again at the first corner, which seemed to be the circuit of all of the corners on the circuit that everyone seems to want to go off. Even George Russell tried to crash out, but he couldn't quite manage it, instead going off the road, but managing not to hit the barriers. Mercedes are dreaming of winning another Grand Prix after winning 3 of the last 4 races, with Lewis Hamilton taking 2 and George Russell taking 1. Free practice 3 had a big red flag thanks to Logan Sargeant, but that didn't stop drivers going off, including Oscar Piastri, and then also the double-time world champion Spaniard Fernando Alonso. I'm now starting to think I should get a job as that Alex Jakes' role of commentating the free practice. We have the Monegasque, the Spaniard, all the familiar ones. In the end, we had the most crazy top 3 in all of Formula 1, with Pierre Gasly topping the session from Kevin Magnussen and Valtteri Bottas. In other words, free practice 3 does not matter at all. So let's go straight into qualifying. In the end of the day, Lewis Hamilton and Sergio Perez had an incident. Lewis Hamilton would get a 3-place grid penalty for it, but that didn't matter anyway. After all, he was so rubbish in qualifying in the first place, it didn't really matter. Moving on into Q2 then, at the end of the day, Hamilton was knocked out along with Carlos Sainz, 11th and 12th on the grid. Hulkenberg still outqualified Magnussen despite being off the track more times than Kevin Magnussen's outqualified him that year. So let's just go on to other news, and obviously Charles Leclerc had the lovely pleasure of knocking out his teammate. Yuki Tsunoda could only manage 13th, and at the end of the day, Fernando Alonso just managed to make it through. Alex Albon made it through to Q3 too. However, that didn't stop him from getting disqualified at the end of the day, which means he's going to start 20th on the grid. Sergio Perez had a scare in Q1 after that impeding incident with Lewis Hamilton, but managed to make it through. In Q3, Max Verstappen tried to fight the McLarens for pole, but they originally locked out the front row. But then came the second runs, which stopped McLaren in their paths. Verstappen managed to do a lap that knocked out Oscar Piastri off the front row, who couldn't quite respond. George Russell went to fourth ahead of Sergio Perez, which is a good enough achievement. Mercedes only had one car in the top 10 for the first time since the Hungarian Grand Prix. So let's go into the race start and see how quickly Lando Norris bottles the race start. Hang on, this time it didn't even get into turn 1. Max Verstappen took the leads easily from Lando Norris as Kevin Magnussen came out the pit lane, a piece of boring information, which is a great word to describe this race. Lewis Hamilton made a recovery from 14th on the grid, getting past Yuki Tsunoda, but that wasn't really much as it was such a boring race. Verstappen continued to stretch his legs in the lead of this Grand Prix. However, Lando Norris eventually caught him up, and on lap 18, despite a strong defence from Max Verstappen, Lando Norris took the lead of the Dutch Grand Prix. And you were never going to lose that as it went to 22 seconds, which makes it the largest winning margin of the entire season. No one expected that. Certainly no one expected this piece of racing here, where Valtteri Bottas and pretty much everyone had a huge fight where everyone overtook each other. Magnussen started ahead and then finished 14th by the end of it. In the race itself, he'd finished P18. Lando Norris would win then, but according to the screen, it said Valtteri Bottas finished in second, which was a brilliant achievement for the Kick Sauber team, except they really didn't and actually finished 19th and 20th. Fun fact, Joe was 1.2 seconds off his teammate in qualifying. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.